Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Business Reimagined. Now, my name is Lucy Hedges. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that is probably most of you, I am a technology journalist and a technology editor for the Metro newspaper in the UK, and someone who you might occasionally see talking tech and travel on the BBC. So I am absolutely delighted to be your host today and to be part of this incredibly insightful and important two-day virtual event. Now, Business Reimagined, as most of you will know, is all about helping businesses to navigate and overcome the coronavirus crisis. Now, it goes without saying that this year has already thrown so many new challenges in the direction of businesses, which have had to essentially rethink their strategies as well as address the challenges created by a completely new way of working. Now, as someone into tech, I am all too familiar with just how crucial technology is when it comes to working remotely, thanks to greatly improved internet connectivity and workforce applications of all kinds of hardware, from affordable and pocket-friendly to the expensive and luxurious to the basic, and to gadgets with all the bells and whistles. Employees in an increasing number of professions can work just about anywhere they want. And pre-COVID, this could be anywhere from, at home, at a coffee shop, to on a plane or on a sun lounger on the beach. Now, of course, it doesn't get more exciting than a makeshift desk in the living room, or for those of you who are a bit more prepared, a lovely home office. But, technology has allowed us to replicate the office environment. We've got tools like Microsoft Teams, Slack, and Zoom that have made it easier to remain connected and productive, whilst the flexibility in working hours has allowed employees to tailor their day to when they work most productively and to deal, with personal commitments. So you can't really see, but I'm tuning in from the confines of my kitchen come living room. It's not the most glamorous of surroundings, but I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. This is the new norm, isn't it? How many of you can relate to, scrambling around before a video call, checking you look presentable, and don't have anything you don't want your colleagues to see in the background? It's completely changed the way we work. I remember when Metro began accepting that working from home is going to be the norm. And believe me, when I say we held on to the bitter end, because, it's so important for us as a team, a creative team, to be in an office and have unified communication and access to the same tools. This is why technology is so important. For some of the older members of the team, having to work remotely was completely foreign to them. And that's as employees. Obviously, for me, witnessing that as a tech person, that was completely shocking. It was like sitting opposite my mum and dad. But the reality of it is that as a company, we had to adjust just like everyone else. New laptops were issued, training courses on how to access the servers and system remotely were happening on a regular basis. New logins were issued. There were new platforms to grapple with, and for some, new machines to get their heads around. IT really loved us that week, I'll tell you that. We had to completely recalibrate how we work. Daily meetings that once took place in the editor's office were now suddenly happening over Zoom. And for me, product launches, briefings, pre-briefings under NDA, and even the social side of things. So, things like cocktail making classes and cooking classes headed by PRs, all these things were happening virtually. Suddenly, this all became the norm. In fact, Zoom, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp video calls, they all seem to be happening all the time and seem to be my life right now. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I kind of wish virtual reality work applications were a thing, because conducting my meetings, brainstorming sessions, interviews and updates on a beach in Mexico would make all those video calls a lot more interesting. It has shown us one thing though, businesses, Metro included, we need to adapt, but we've seen now firsthand that they can still operate and that teams can remain productive outside of a traditional office structure with the right setup in place. And that brings me on to what Business Reimagined is all about. So over the course of the next 2 days, we'll be hearing from a range of local business speakers who'll be looking at some of the challenges faced by businesses during lockdown and providing some expert advice and coping strategies to deal with them. So let's just take you through the agenda. I'm going to give you a rundown of how the event will go. So in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce our first speaker of the day, James Pinchbeck from Streets Chartered Accountants, who will be leading with a presentation called Time to Start with a Blank Piece of Paper or a New Excel Spreadsheet. James will be followed by Paul Reams from Blue Cube. You'll be discussing staying engaged with your customers and keeping your workforce connected. That will then be followed by Ben Smith from Tatila Networks, who'll be talking to you about enhancing connectivity for remote working. And finally, Louise Norman from Amica HR will be taking the virtual stage to talk strategy for maintaining and ensuring productivity whilst working from home in the new normal. So we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today with equally brilliant presentations. Now, each of the two 90-minute webinars will address some of the biggest challenges facing businesses, including communications, IT and security, health and safety in the workplace, and home office, engaging with a remote workforce, finance, and HR. There's a lot that we're going to be discussing today. We'll be covering some really, really important, timely issues that we hope will be useful for your business moving forward. Now, on that note, I'd like to welcome Paul Reams from Blue Cube. Just have a quick chat before we kick things off. Hey, Paul.
Morning, Lucy. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. There's a small delay there. I thought you were going to be able to hear me, which is slightly worrying time. But yeah, all good. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, this is such a fantastic event. It's going to help out so many people. We're at a time when advice is paramount at the moment. So why exactly was this event created and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I think we were all sent home at pretty short notice at the beginning of the year, and we found a way to sort of cope with the the restrictions that are put on us as businesses now. But we always hold an event at Blue Cube every year for our customers, and we can't do the kind of event we would normally do, which would be a face-to-face kind of event. So we wanted to do something different. And then once the conversation started, and I started speaking to other people about what we wanted to do and the message we wanted to get across, it was really just to help businesses that have had to work in a different way this year and find a way of working effectively, because I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions that businesses have, and a lot of questions about how they're going to make things work under these new norm sort of scenario that we find ourselves in. So yeah, it was just about really getting some key people together to share some advice and some information and support businesses in the area.
Yeah. Admittedly, Paul, I'm going to have to admit my connection, or maybe it was your connection, so I missed what you said at the beginning, but definitely caught up with what you said at the end. Fingers crossed that's the only technical glitch that we have during this event.
Let's hope so.
Given what the event is about. Charlie, are you there?
Yes. Hello, I am here. Hello.
Excellent. How are you, Charlie?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Really happy to be hosting this event at this time. So you're from the university. Why did the university decide to support this event?
So for us, it's all around supporting local businesses in Greater Lincolnshire and helping them to grow, boost productivity and help them to innovate. It's also great for us to partner with leading local businesses who are experts in their field. So for us, it's a great opportunity to kind of help and support.
You're right. Now is such a good time for collaboration, and those two key words that you use, like there, help and support. Yeah. Everyone needs it. So this is such a great event, and thank you so much for that little insight that you just gave us. And so now that we are officially in another lockdown, or lockdown 2.0, as I like to call it, it is now vital and more important than ever for all businesses to get their questions and concerns answered and to understand and ultimately get their heads around how to navigate the difficult month ahead. Now, before we kick things off, I just want to say a huge thanks must go to Blue Cube and the University of Lincoln and all of the fantastic speakers who've dedicated their time to arranging what is set to be a fantastic and vital event for businesses in in Lincolnshire. I also encourage you to use the hashtag Business Reimagined for any social media that you're going to write about the event today. And if you have any burning questions for any of our speakers throughout the course of the event, please do be sure to pop them in the chat function, and we will try and get them answered in the Q&A session at the end. So on that note, I think I've babbled enough. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day. Now, James Pinchbeck from Streets Chartered Accountants. Make him feel welcome on the virtual stage. I know you can't give him a round of applause, but I'm sure he can feel your energy. Now, in his role as marketing partner, James is a specialist in marketing professional services and responsible for the strategic development of marketing. And he'll be talking about starting with a clean slate, with a presentation named Time to Start with a Blank Piece of Paper or a New Excel Spreadsheet. So James, I hand the virtual floor over to you.
My name's James Pinchbeck from Streets Chartered Accountants, and I'm delighted to be hosting this session as part of Business Reimagined. I'd just like to start with perhaps thoughts about business pre-COVID. Many businesses operated with a clarity of vision and strategic intent, and a sense of purpose. Many have operated with established business models with clear working practice and a managed workforce, financial stability, financial forecast, even a business strategy or plan. We also operated with relative economic certainty. So what happened? Well, on post-March the 23rd, many businesses faced an unusual and unprecedented circumstances of an impact of a lockdown. In the initial instance, most businesses responded on an operational basis, dealing to the situation the best they could, given the guidance they received as part of the requirements to deal with the pandemic. Many businesses faced mothballing or hibernation. Those businesses as such were unable to trade due to the lockdown situation and were required to do so, often by the government. Many businesses able to continue to trade, and that is to deal with customers and also operate their business, had to face a new set of challenges, repurposing and addressing alternative markets or customers. Such typical examples are restaurants who adapted for the takeaway market. Other businesses had to pivot and adopt new business models and practices and process conducive to survival. Many of us had to, as a consequence of lockdown, work remotely and from home rather than our normal conventional office or premise environment. Also, following March, most businesses sought to address the situation about business security and looking after the livelihood of the business and the workforce that worked within that business. Fortunately, the government, like many governments across the world, introduced a number of measures to support businesses, whether it was the coronavirus job retention scheme, the business interruption loan scheme, or local authority grants through to the self-employed income support scheme. These schemes have proved vital to the sustainability and viability of businesses, helping to preserve cash and protect the very essence of running a business. Easing of lockdown to lockdown version 2. There's food for thought. Early in the summer, we saw an easement of the lockdown arrangements, and we were encouraged to eat out to help out, and also allowed to go on staycations or holidays in the UK as well as overseas. We also saw early September the return of our children, perhaps to many of our blessings, to education and the schools they were studying at. We also saw an encouragement of government for us to return to our workplace, place of work. And partly, I think it was on the basis to support the allied industries and shops and businesses that many of us frequent either at lunchtime or before and after work. We also saw a return of students, many new students to university and higher education. As a consequence, and unfortunately, we've also seen an upturn in the number of people affected by the pandemic and those catching or getting the virus. That led to a number of local lockdown situations now following an introduction of a tier system with 1 to 3. As I've said earlier, many businesses responded to the situation the best they could. Many of us are dealing with operationally to ensure that we remain in business and deal with the current situation. We're now in a situation, though, perhaps with a lasting impact of the pandemic on our business, and also the strategic direction and approach we take for those businesses going forward. It's not untypical to hear about the world of business has changed in terms of what we do, where we do it, when we do it, how we do it, even why we do it, as a new mantra for the direction of business travel. Certainly, it is unlikely that we'll return to life as it was before March this year. And unfortunately, I don't think return to work or going back to business will be as simple as a factory reset. What then has changed? What are the lasting changes that we face and that we need to take into account when we look at the future of our businesses and the direction of travel we take? Perhaps one of the first things to think about is how our businesses behaved and responded to the lockdown situations. A number of businesses are probably likely to fare better than their competitors or other businesses for a number of reasons, and these include, not typically, how they have engaged and gone with it the extra mile with their customers, how they've adapted to the situation and ensured their customers are looked after and cared for. Equally, how they've looked after their employees and actually their livelihoods and what situation and they've put in place to ensure that employees are aware of what the impact of the pandemic on the business, how they've supported them to adapt to new working ways, and how they've actually kept in touch and informed them of the development of the business and shown some element of passion or compassion. Certainly, we've also seen a situation where, unfortunately, workers have had to be furloughed, unable to work or continue to work in their business or organisation. Similarly, we've seen workers and employees continue to be engaged in the business. This in itself has created a sense of disturbance, inequality, anxiety and frustrations and conflict within the workforce, with different pressures on those both furloughed and those still engaged in the work. Moving forward, perhaps one of the biggest impacts of the pandemic is the greater use of technology and digital skills we've all been required to adopt. It also has allowed us to move from working in an office environment or a business premise to working from home. The situation with the greater use of technology has also given changes to the way we work and the jobs that we undertake and the nature of the work. As a consequence, we've probably seen a situation where more work is based on the output of that work rather than the time spent, more task-driven work than time-based work. As a consequence, it's really need to understand as a business how we measure the productivity of our workforce and the impact our workforce makes on our business. It's also given rise to a situation where the nature and the time of where we work has changed. How many of us have spent long hours at home forgetting that actually it is the end of the working day, but with little else to do and perhaps nowhere to go, we've carried on working. The other impact I think about the use of technology in the workplace has actually been around the situation where often we feel isolated, whereas we may have had interactions with our colleagues whilst we're going for a coffee or as the water cooler talk, or even in an informal meeting. We now work often in isolation, with the only interaction being with our family, friends, or immediate people that live around us. And we've tended to lose that connection with our colleagues and work colleagues. This has really given a rise to the need for many of our employers and business leaders to be more compassionate and have empathy with our workforce, understanding the well-being issues that we face as we choose to balance work life with work. Also, perhaps one of the biggest changes is actually around the leadership and direction of a business. Pre-pandemic, it was often the case that businesses had a determined leadership team who actually knew the direction of travel, knew what was required, and ensured that was being put in place and people were delivering it. The current situation, which is so volatile, uncertain, and constantly changing, means that often one person or one leader is not able or have the skills to actually deal with the situation. As a consequence, there's a greater need for collaborative working and leadership. Particularly in the current situation, our workforce and businesses are looking for strategic direction that actually provides the assurity and trust that they need and comfort to ensure that they can discharge their own duties. One of the biggest changes has been the end of long-term strategic planning. Gone are the days where people perhaps produce a 5-year business plan. Whilst they may produce a strategic intent for a longer period of time, increasingly business planning is on a more frequent basis dealing with scenarios and impact situations rather than the certainty of a long-term or intent. Coin a phrase or use of words, we increasingly live in a VUCA world, one which is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. As such, business leaders have to respond to the changes that come about and deal with them to ensure that their business continues to survive. That's what also matters that's come out of the pandemic is the need to build and establish resilience within organisations. And that's not just resilience from leadership and management, but resilience within the workforce and resilience and sustainability in the very essence of the business, including the management, processes and finance. There's also a growing need for the greater use of financial management information in real time, and to ensure that we're actually in touch and know the current financial situation of our business on a day-to-day basis. No longer can we wait for management accounts. No longer can we hope that the bank balances are favourable. We need that information now, and we need it to be realistic, meaningful and helpful in decision making. That's what the other big changes that I've seen in the management of businesses is around marketing. We've seen an acceleration in digital marketing as businesses respond quickly and immediately to the challenges they face in communicating with a diverse audience. The other big change I think that's come about in the last few months and or been more escalated is the fact that actually it doesn't matter where our businesses is located or where we choose to go and do business. Physical and geographical boundaries are probably less important or less of a challenge now than they were pre-lockdown. In essence, if there is a digital connection, we can do business or choose to do business or connect with those individuals we wish to connect with. Underlying all this is, as we've heard in the media for many months now, is the significant financial cost of the pandemic, both on the country, but also in terms of the government. It's estimated that we've already spent more than the cost of the Second World War in the months since the start of the pandemic. And it's highly likely that further costs will be incurred in actually dealing with the challenge and safeguarding the lives and livelihood of the people that work and live in this country. As a consequence, it's not unrealistic to expect that in the coming months and years, we will see a change in taxation as the government seeks to recoup the financial support that is put in place. Equally, we may see incentives to help businesses grow and develop. Certainly, in the last few months, we've seen a growth in the number of businesses starting up and those individuals switching from employment to self-employment. As in adversity, opportunity often prevails. Underlying all this is actually consumer spending and consumer confidence. Invariably, consumers are reliant on feeling comfortable about their financial security, as well as their COVID security increasingly when they're making purchasing decisions. Whilst this may remain strong, we're also seeing issues around supply in marketplaces, not least in shops, even online, as actually whilst we may have demand for products and services, we're not, because of frustrated supply chain and supply issues, often able to buy them. Equally, will consumers go back to the high street? Will consumers and individuals decide actually to balance up their consumer spending with their financial security going forward? How many people do we all know have been affected financially by the impact of the pandemic, have been having to draw on or live on savings and other income support for their own survival and food, etc. Given this background, many of us now face the challenging of actually addressing the longer term and dealing with the situation that we face today. As I said earlier, it is not about as easy as just a factory reset. The world is different and it will continue to change, perhaps faster than it did yesterday or the day before. So we now need to deal with it. We need to provide certainty to our businesses and direction to our workforce, and to ensure that actually our businesses are sustainable going forward. Where do we start? And there lies in the theme of putting pen to paper and starting with a clean piece of paper. Often this is the single biggest challenge. It's much easier to start with something you've already produced, adapt and change it, but it doesn't mean that actually is the right process or the right journey to start with. And actually, given the scenarios we've outlined, the real challenge is actually to start with that blank piece of paper. I would start with the known knowns. I would also start with, what are my business objectives? Why am I in business? Perhaps a time to reflect on, why did I start this business? Or what do I want this business now to be? Or actually, what has the last few months actually impacted on me, and what is my viewpoint today? Many businesses are focused on growth, and that's great to see, and it's a great driver for business. But actually, I think there's been a rebalance. Sustainability and resilience of business are equally important. Often the case with many family businesses that survive many generations is the very essence that their whole reason for being is to ensure that business is there in the future. Equally, or parallel to that, is the fact that growth strategies often take businesses off course and actually make them more vulnerable. So go back to basics. Why am I a business? Consider my strategy. What do I want to be in business for? And what are my objectives? My objectives pre-lockdown may be to improve the profitability or to grow my turnover or revenue by a percentage. Increasingly, it may be to safeguard cash. It may be to explore the possibility of new customers or new markets as those customers or markets have gone that I enjoyed pre-lockdown. It may be that actually what you want to do is scale it back to a sustainable basis that actually reduces some of the pressures businesses have faced over the years. It may be that you've actually had enough of being in business and actually you're now looking for an exit route and it may be time to sell. It may be in some business cases that the life cycle of that business has come to an end. I was fortunate or unfortunate to read recently a Lincoln to Life magazine, which covered adverts from probably the 1970s. It was quite illuminating to see how many of those businesses that operated in that period of time no longer existed. And actually, whether it's market conditions or just the natural life cycle, sometimes businesses have come to an end, and there's nothing wrong with that. Equally, it may be that your business and your ideas are actually new ideas. In terms of repurposing businesses or pivoting businesses, as we've talked about earlier on, many of those businesses that have faced the impact of the pandemic have done something differently. Whether it was that you're an exhibition organizer or producer of exhibition stands and you've moved, taking your skills to produce other things like garden bars or materials for online conferences and events. So your business may have changed, and that may be your future strategy. You may not revert back to the things you did before. You may actually not want to revert back to the things you did before because these new things are exciting and provide you with growth opportunities. Moving on, we've talked about the known knowns and your intentions. There are the known unknowns. And actually, in building a strategy or plan, we need to think out what don't we know that we think we should know. Now, you may not be easy to find those solutions, but there are ways and means of looking for the answers to those problems, either by consultation, discussion, collaboration, actually working with your colleagues and peers to actually say, what are the risks? What don't we know that we should know? Equally, they're the unknown unknowns. Therein lies the challenge. Who knows? Only if we did, the unknown unknowns. But for sanity of mind, it's always better to start with the known knowns, work through the unknown unknowns, and then perhaps the unknown unknowns become less of a challenge. As I've mentioned, just in summary, I think the whole premise of dealing with the challenge going forward, based on the fact that we are not likely to return to the same state of business as we did pre-lockdown, is to start with your strategic intent. And I think that is a conversation, if you're a small organisation for the leadership team, perhaps wider engagement. It creates a great sense of well-being and engagement and direction of travel and support. That actually, if you bring in your colleagues and peers actually to discuss where the strategic intent of the business is. As I say, refreshing yourself why you're in business, what you did before lockdown, what has changed as a consequence of lockdown, what are those are likely to remain, what you now need to put in place, through to what is your overall reason for being in business and sustain, and this, I would suggest a greater focus on the sustainability and resilience of that business. In terms of does it all add up, this is where the spreadsheets start to come in and start putting the numbers in the spreadsheet. As I say, invariably, if you start with what you've already got, you're not likely to actually see the wood for the trees or come out with a new business model. If you have latest financial and management information, revised budgets and forecasts, use those as the premise for building on your new financial forecasts and modelling. Use that to test as well, and actually use your new strategy to determine your financial forecasts and modelling and your financial objectives. It might be that actually you would rather see less revenue and more profit, or to have more cash in the business than take it out to ensure the survivability and sustainability of the business. As I said earlier, really the whole point is that action needs to be taken. Recognise you need to do something for your business, not just for you, but also for your staff, your customers and stakeholders. There is a need to set performance objectives as well as KPIs. You will have identified the things you need to work on, that you'll need to do things differently, and that it is a team effort. There'll be questions you need answers to. There'll be advice you need advice on. There's a plethora of people out there and events like this to support you. We'll need to ensure that you engage with and communicate your new plan and strategy. It cannot be done in isolation. Your workforce and your customers and marketplace want to understand where you're going with your business. They want to have a sense of direction and purpose. I would also suggest that as you go through this process, that you look at a process for review, adapt, and improve and respond. That way, you'll ensure that going forward, your business is much more responsive and appropriate for the marketplace and overall more sustainable. In signing off and finishing this presentation, and it's great to be with you today, we are in unprecedented times, but it is overall better to do something than not, however hard or challenging that feels. Overall, as I say, it may be hard work, but I think that hard work will pay off. I wish you all the best. Please do draw on the wisdom and experience that's being presented through this Business Reimagined. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best.
James, thank you so much. A fantastic start to the day with an equally fantastic presentation. A lot of great advice in there and lots to think about. You know, the world of business has changed. You know, returning to work is not going to be as simple as hitting a reset button. As James said, it's about adapting new business models and practices and triggering that survival mode, basically. You know, equally important is how businesses adapt and look after employees. And, you know, and like James says, businesses have to respond now. Action needs to be taken. And, you know, there are a lot of opportunities for growth. So it's about fine-tuning that strategy and doing what works for you. And I know all too well how easy it is to overwork at the end of the day. Working from home is definitely up to the hours. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that as well. So James, thank you so much. Now, our next speaker is one of the brains behind the event. We've already had a chat with him earlier. So I'm going to welcome back Paul Reams. Now, Paul is a managing director and founder at Blue Cube. He's got over 20 years experience in the telecommunications industry and a substantial amount of experience in providing communication solutions to the corporate and SME market. So Paul really knows his stuff and he's got a great presentation lined up. So I'll now hand over the floor to Paul, who will be talking about staying engaged with your customers and keeping your workforce connected. So handing over to you, Paul.
Hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Reams. I'm the Managing Director of Blue Cube. I'm also a co-host of this Business Reimagined event. And as such, I'd like to thank you for joining me today and tomorrow, where we'll be looking at some of the challenges that 2020 have thrown at us and some of the solutions to those challenges, more importantly. So 2020 has been a challenging year. That's probably a massive understatement. We were sent home in March for the original lockdown. We spent 3 months able to leave our homes, really. And since then, we've had to change the way that we live and change the way that we work and make huge compromises and deal with social distancing measures that make life just generally more difficult. But I think we've done that remarkably well. And I want to focus today on the positives to come out of 2020, because it's very easy to get bogged down with the doom and gloom of what this year has thrown at us. But I think there have been some really good things to come out of it as well. When I think back to my own lockdown experience, I was sent home, and yes, like you, I was anxious and worried about what was going to happen during lockdown and beyond. But actually, when I think back now, I've got some pretty happy memories of lockdown as well. I got to spend 12 weeks unexpectedly at home with my wife and my children, and that was a massive bonus. And the news this year has been dominated by the pandemic, of course, but there have been some really great stories, like the Colonel Tom story of Captain Tom becoming Colonel Tom because he raised £36 million by walking around his garden for the NHS. Amazing story. And the way that the community came together to collectively show their support for the NHS workers. You know, that was fantastic. And there's been some really good things happen this year amidst all the sort of the darkness, really. So that's what I want to focus on. That's what this event is about. This event is about coming together as a business community to share ideas and share expertise and advice and look at the technology that's out there to help us not just create a coping mechanism for the pandemic and a coping strategy, actually put together a successful strategy to successfully navigate our businesses through this tough time that we find ourselves in. because I believe that although we're having to work differently and operate under a new sort of norm, that we can still be successful. We can be just as efficient, if not more efficient, and more successful than we were pre-COVID. So that's what today and tomorrow is about. Today and tomorrow is about helping you as businesses get through this pandemic. So let's start by looking at your communication strategy as a business, because I think that's a really important part of your overall success plan during the pandemic. Everything's different. We can't all be in the same place anymore. You know, if you look at the home working figures before this year, maybe 10% of the population work regularly at home. That figure has grown exponentially, obviously, because of the pandemic and the challenges this year has thrown at us. And now we're looking for ways to keep our teams connected. We can't all be in the office like we were traditionally and until March this year, but we still need to be able to communicate effectively with our colleagues. So how do we do that? And people are looking to cloud and cloud-based solutions for answers. And of course, cloud services mean that you can access business critical tools that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be able to access unless you're in the office from anywhere that you've got a good internet connection. So the consumption of cloud-based services has grown dramatically this year. Bluecube have been around since 2008, and we started providing our first cloud services back in 2014. And today, in 2020, we're billing about 1.3 million minutes every month for cloud-based business calls. So we know a thing or two about cloud, and we want to talk to you about the benefits to your business of getting the right infrastructure, the right communications infrastructure in place now, because we don't know what's around the corner. Now, I think the pandemic has thrown two big problems at us as businesses, and I want to look at them in isolation because they're big subjects. The first problem for me, and the biggest one, is the fact that we can't see our customers at the moment. They can't visit us, and we can't go and see them. So how do we continue to maintain those business relationships that we've worked really hard over the years to achieve, but we can't go out and see them for a face-to-face meeting and tell them what we're doing and communicate our news to them? And more so, how do we develop new relationships? How do we win business? We can't stand in front of a customer or potential customer and tell them about who we are and what we're doing and why they should use us on a face-to-face basis. That's a big problem for you, no matter what kind of business you are. And the second issue, which we've already touched on, is the fact that we can't be together as a team. So how do we look after our people? How do we make sure they're not feeling isolated, working from home all the time? How do we make sure they're feeling connected to their team still, even if they're working remotely? And how do we manage them as well? How do we make sure that the performance levels don't start to drop and productivity doesn't start to drop when we can't manage them on a face-to-face basis? But there are solutions to these problems, but they're not going to come and find you. They're out there, but you need to look for the solutions that can suit your business best. And I want to start by talking to you about the solutions to the customer problem, the problem that we can't see our customers on a face-to-face basis. So we've all become familiar with video calling, virtual meetings over this last year. You know, before March this year, probably not many of us used Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these kind of tools that we're using now to communicate remotely. And whether you like them or not, you know, they're not the same as a face-to-face meeting, but at the moment they're a pretty good second best. And I use an example. I went to buy a sofa in the last couple of weeks with my wife, and I chatted to the guy that owned the store and asked him how business was, and he was saying that at the moment it was pretty good, but he was really worried that if we went into a second lockdown, if it was a long-term second lockdown, you know, he was worried about the future of his business because he hadn't got any kind of online presence and he didn't know how to communicate with his customers remotely. And I said to him, I think you need to deal with that problem now, because waiting to see what happens is probably the worst mistake you can make. You know, this year is full of uncertainty, and probably next year is going to be an uncertain year as well. And rather than waiting for the problems to happen, we need to maybe prepare ourselves for those issues and find some solutions to those issues before they become a real problem for us as businesses. Now, video calling, you know, some people aren't particularly comfortable with it. Standing and looking into a camera like I'm doing at the moment, and often looking at your own face is probably not ideal. We would rather be looking at that person on a face-to-face basis, but we can't do that right now. So let's look at some of the video calling options we've got. I think it's really important that you find a video calling tool that gives you everything you need as a business, because things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams will solve some of the problems you've got as businesses, but they won't solve all of the problems you've got as businesses. And
You need a platform that will give you chat, video calling, audio calling, give you the opportunity to host your own virtual meeting, share files internally. There's loads of stuff you can do. And people like BlueCube can help you decide on the best virtual meeting platform and unified communications platform to suit your business. But I don't think at BlueCube we'll go back to, well, I know in fact we won't go back to the old way of working because it makes no sense for us. We have been using video calling tools and virtual meeting tools for a long time now, but perhaps not as regularly as we should have been, because now we're having to do all of our meetings online instead of on a face-to-face basis. But you see just how much sense it makes to our business. We don't have to travel 2 hours to a meeting that takes 45 minutes, and then travel 2 hours back. We can have a 45-minute meeting in 45 minutes, and all the the travelling costs and expense that goes with those unnecessary journeys is gone now. We're not damaging the environment by travelling to meetings we don't need to do on a face-to-face basis all the time. We're saving ourselves so much time. We can do 4, 5, 6 meetings in a day, whereas before we could only do 1, 2 or 3 meetings in a day, depending on where the client was. So, a lot of this new way of working, I think, will stay with us as businesses going, beyond this pandemic, whatever that might be, because it makes total sense. The other thing I want to talk to you about, another way of, easing some of those barriers you've got at the moment when you're reaching out to your customers, is a technology called WebRTC. It's a real-time communications technology, and we use it on our own website. If you go to the BlueCube website, that's www.bluecubecloud.com, and go to the About page or the Contact page, you'll see that you can contact any of the BlueCube team directly via the website. So a website visitor can go onto any of these pages, they can find the person that they've been dealing with or that they'd like to speak to, and they can start a dialogue with them, whether that's by chat, or by audio or video call, or by email. They can speak to the person that they want to speak to. And I think people like that at the moment. Live chat's been around for a while now. You've probably got it on your website, or you're familiar with it at least. But live chat will open a conversation with the business. It won't take you through to the person that you want to speak to, and WebRTC gives you that advantage. And people, I think, like that because, if you've got to call into a business that's maybe not as good as they'd like to be at handling their inbound calls, and people have to wait on hold or in a queue before they get through to somebody, they've got to get through to the correct person, then talk about the weather before they actually get to ask the question they want to ask and get a simple, answer to a simple question. People don't want to waste all that time now, so they want to do things online. People have to do things online, but if they get through to the person they want to deal with, it's a much easier experience for them as a customer. So WebRTC is something we've been doing a lot of at BlueCube this year. People are really liking this tool. It's not an expensive tool. It's part of our unified communications package on a particular platform. So we can talk to you about it if you want us to. And the last thing I want to look at on the external communication side of things is digital marketing. Now, this is by no means an area of expertise for BlueCube or for myself, but it's something that we have really invested in during this pandemic. We're not able to go out and see our customers in the way that we normally would. We can't go to networking events anymore. We can't hold events for our customers like we normally do on an annual basis. So through digital marketing, we've been able to talk to them in a different way. And we use an agency because it's a mixed skill set that you need to create a really good and effective digital marketing campaign. So we use a great agency, and they allow us to reach out to customers in a different way. So, we do pay-per-click advertising. The SEO optimization for our website is really good. We are sending out newsletters on a regular basis, press releases. Like I say, we're developing our website. There's loads of different things you need to do to be effective online, and a good digital marketing agency will be able to help you with that. So they're the external things that are causing us problems in 2020, and will continue to while we can't go out and see customers. But how do we talk to our own team as well? How do we communicate effectively with our own team while we can't be in the same place? We're going to look at that now. We've already looked at how important video calling and virtual meeting tools are during this pandemic. And to provide your own team with an efficient way of communicating, then they need to be able to do the basics, like take a call on the business number and transfer that call to a colleague and put people on hold if they're not actually in the office. Now that's pretty basic stuff now, but a lot of companies still don't have the capability to do that. And I think that's because there hasn't really been a catalyst before this pandemic to make them move away from old technology and use this cloud-based technology that's available now. And it can do far more than that. A good UC platform, unified communications platform, can allow you to use telephony tools, video calling tools, virtual meeting tools. You can chat to your colleagues. You can share information with your colleagues through file sharing. You can integrate with things like your CRM system, and any other sort of day-to-day software that you're using should all be able to link together, because that's the key to digitalising your business. If you can't make it easy for your staff, then they're probably not going to use it. So having to go from one tool to another to solve different problems isn't going to work for your team. They need to be able to use one platform that integrates with all the other pieces of software that you use throughout your business to make life easy for them. Because that's what we're looking at here. We're looking about how we can make life easy for our employees to do their job, because if they can do it easily, they'll continue to do it efficiently. And lastly from me today, I just want to look at how we maintain productivity during these difficult times. And we could all operate on a trust basis when our team are working from home, but it's better to have technology that will allow you to keep an eye on what's going on. And the bit of software you're looking at the moment is something called a Kixi. Now, Kixi is something we roll out across all our UC platforms at Bluecube. It's analytics software, so it will tell us what our team is doing as a whole, and we can look at individuals and look at their individual performance levels, activity, inbound activity, outbound call activity, how many calls we're missing as a business and what the value to those calls is. There's all sorts of reports you can run out of a Kixi that will help you to run your business successfully. And there are lots of other tools like a Kixi out there to help you to manage your team even when we can't see what they're doing physically. So, I think that's the message I want to take. I'd like you to take from today, is that there is technology out there to help you. You've got to find the right technology for you to solve your specific problems, and then roll it out to your team and let them use it, and find a successful way, as I said right at the beginning of this talk today, to manage your business through this pandemic, and probably this longer term way of working successfully. We don't want people to just get by. We want you to manage your team successfully and deliver successfully in a different way. So I hope you've really enjoyed what I've said today, or found it at least interesting. And I think there's going to be some great speakers after me talking about different areas of business and different problems in business, and giving you advice and information on how to solve those particular problems. So thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the event. Back to you, Lucy. Thanks very much.
Paul, thank you so much. Some great advice and really interesting stuff. It does actually feel crazy that we've been working from home since March. I don't know about you, but the last few months have just rolled into one. So March feels like it was not that long ago, but it has actually been quite a long time. So staying engaged with customers and keeping the workforce connected and being effective online, like Paul said, is so, so important right now. And yes, there are so many challenges that 2020 have thrown at us, but there are lots of solutions as well, like Paul pointed out. That means you can be just as efficient as you would be in an office environment. I definitely don't miss traveling to meetings, and the money that I've saved on that has been fantastic. So, there are a lot of bonuses to working from home, and it's all about getting the right communication infrastructure in place to digitize your business, ensuring that employees are productive and working as efficiently as they would do in an office environment with the right tools at your disposal. So found everything that Paul had to say incredibly insightful. And that brings me on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is a Faster Britain ambassador with a lot of experience as a connectivity and communications consultant. So basically think of this guy as some kind of connectivity crusader, helping to deliver faster broadband services to businesses, homes, business parks, villages, towns and cities across the UK. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ben. Ben will now take the floor with his presentation.
Good morning. Firstly, I hope you and your families are all safe and well and are managing to adapt to the new normal we'll find ourselves in. I'd also like to thank Paul and the other organisers for inviting me to speak at this online event. I'm Ben Smith from Tutela Networks, and I'm here to talk about improving connectivity for remote working, and we will also be announcing something really exciting coming to Lincoln soon. We, like the vast majority of you all, are working from home, but working from home doesn't have to affect the level of service provided to customers and productivity. In fact, some people I've spoken to have said they have seen an increase in productivity with more staff working from home in a flexible environment. Of course, we all still want and need to retain the human and personal element of business, just as we do in our private lives, but at the minute, this isn't a choice. Adapting new technologies and products such as those Paul has spoken about will play a key part in deciding those who thrive through adversity and those that fall behind. The sudden acceptance and adoption of video calls and meetings was remarkable during the last lockdown, but for those who have moved across or are already making the most of an existing unified communications platform, it's just another day not at the office. To make use of these technologies and maintain productivity levels without adding to the stress and worry everyone is at threat of, you and your other team members need good, fast and reliable connectivity both at home and the office. Unfortunately, as with other areas of the country, Lincolnshire has many areas that are underserved when it comes to traditional broadband, and as more and more people stay at home to go online, it could have an even larger detrimental effect on your home broadband speeds. With this in mind, why don't we consider installing dedicated connectivity solutions for work into your home workers' houses? These can be traditional fibre to the cabinet connections, or where the speeds are slow and fibre is unavailable, look at a 4G solution, which can be provisioned a lot quicker. There are three main options when it comes to choosing a 4G solution, and one size doesn't fit all. Option 1 is a MiFi device. MiFi gives greater flexibility than standard mobile broadband dongles with the ability to connect with multiple devices, so those who need to work from home can connect their phone, tablet and laptop at the same time. Limitations with these devices is that they rely on a good indoor 4G signal, and if the coverage is not great, then speeds will be slow. It is intended to be used by a small number of devices in the same room owned by the same person, so it doesn't allow for scalability to other family members. Option 2 is to install an internal router with an optional external antenna. This option allows you to access and share your 4G or 3G mobile broadband connections. Once you insert the SIM card into your router, you can share your 4G connection through a secure wireless network or any other of the Ethernet ports. This option is designed with constant connection in mind and would act like a normal home router. If the indoor 4G signal is not very good though, speeds will be affected. This can be remedied by installing an external antenna. The antenna, however, has a maximum run of 5 meters from the router. This can cause a problem when locating the router where you would like it best and where the best location for the antenna is, and they conflict with each other. All of these factors can lead to an unreliable and inconsistent service and speeds. Option 3 is to install an external router with an indoor access point. This option is the preferred choice for many as it delivers a reliable service that can replace the need for a fixed line broadband altogether. The solution can capably provide connectivity for a home or business of any size and deliver fast fibre-like speeds where 4G dongles and mobile phones fail to even find a signal. You can also run your network devices through this option by including a static IP service, meaning even the most complex operations can continue to function. The only limitation of this option is that it works best when professionally installed, but many people do successfully self-install with remote support. The business world is evolving and technology is at the heart of this evolution. The driving force is gigabit-capable full fibre connectivity. Whether it's connecting to servers, accessing cloud-based apps or running IP-based services, superior connectivity is a common denominator amongst successful businesses, no matter their size. Ultra-fast full fibre connectivity allows businesses to scale and communicate in uniquely effective ways. a copper-based services become increasingly obsolete, it is becoming less of a luxury and more a necessity. Indeed, it is now a key hygiene factor for the modern business and for citizens that live and consume services online. But we are not just looking at now, we are looking to the future, and everyone coming back to the office and moving Lincoln forwards with an added advantage for businesses to grow and develop. And with this means a Faster Britain full fibre ultra-fast connectivity network is coming to Lincoln. Faster Britain is an ultra-fast digital infrastructure across the UK. Tutela Networks are proud to be ambassadors of this fantastic programme and bringing these fantastic services to Lincoln in partnership with Paul and the team at Blue Cube. Faster Britain already has a national presence with 31 networks, of which 16 are full fibre networks. They are on track to triple network build year on year, with 10 plus expansions and new network locations already planned in as well as Lincoln. The Lincoln network build is expected to go live in Q1 of 2021, starting on the Science and Innovation Park before moving into the city centre and then other areas of the city. If you have a business or area you would like looking at, please make myself or the Blue Cube team aware. You can also visit www.fasterbritain.com/Lincoln to register your interest. If you are watching from somewhere other than Lincoln and have business parks or other underserved buildings in areas outside of the city, we are always looking for new projects to develop. If you have any questions on this section and what I've spoke about, please put them in the chat box or reach out to myself, Paul, or one of the Blue Cube team. I'd like to thank you yourselves for attending and all of the other fantastic speakers involved in the event over the 2 days. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you again soon and wishing you all a faster future.
Ben, thank you so much. An exciting announcement with the Lincoln network build there, and some really crucial advice from Ben about connectivity. You know, reliable connectivity is a must. Depending on where you live, coverage can either be one of those things that's super amazing or one of those things that makes you want to bang your head against a desk. You know, and Ben is right, there isn't a one size fits all solution. It's all about finding the right solution for you, you know, to increase productivity and, you know, to enable that human and personal element of your business. So I do hope you enjoyed that presentation. And now on to our final presentation of the day. It's being done by a lady called Louise Norman, who's HR assistant from Amica HR. Now this presentation is all about strategy for maintaining and ensuring productivity whilst working from home in the new normal. So Louise, it's over to you.
Hi everybody, thank you for attending today's webinar and thank you for the opportunity to enable us to present. My name is Michelle Page and I'm the HR Manager at Amica HR.
My name is Louise Norman and I'm the HR Assistant at Amica HR. Amica is a human resources consultancy company based in Lincoln and London. We support a variety of SMEs across the country with bespoke HR needs ranging from contracts to full-on case management.
Today's webinar we're going to look at what is a new normal. So obviously in the last 7 months everything has changed in the work arena with the pandemic. Today's session particularly focusing on work-life balance and how we've now seen an element of workforce now working from home. So the topics we're going to discuss are balancing work and family lives, which is obviously a huge challenge for the majority, collaboration and engagement, the legal considerations and when we might need to consider to consult, how we manage performance remotely, and what are the benefits for working from home. And then at the end we're going to conclude with whether you need to consider having a home working policy in place. So balancing work and family life, this has somewhat been challenging for some of us. On a personal level, I'll have hands up to say that I've certainly struggled with this, having a 2-year-old at home. I think obviously we never predicted back in March that the home-life balance would continue for quite so long. Obviously here we are 7 months in and a large majority is still working from home. One thing as business owners to really consider as an employer is the balance and challenges that people do have in home lives. We've all been on those phone calls over the last 7 months where we've seen children in the background, or we've seen partners dropping cups of tea into conference calls, and we've actually given us an opportunity to see a window into their home lives, which we probably wouldn't have seen as managers and business owners before. But that's not go without saying to say that we do need to be mindful of that impact of those employers moving forward. Some employers obviously wear multiple roles in their home lives, with some of them obviously being caregivers and support providers. And so obviously having them work in a home environment is somewhat of a challenge. So maybe be mindful and considerate of your employees. And hopefully over the last several months you've got to know your employees far more than you would have done historically. So just being mindful of whether that home working is actually going to work for their family environment, and what's going to happen to them in the future.
I mean, of course, talking about work-life balance, we're also touching on productivity. Are home workers productive is ultimately the question that we're getting quite a lot at Amica, and I think ultimately it comes down on a case-by-case basis. A study by The Independent found that 58% of workers felt that they were more productive at home, but across the board we've not seen a massive drop in productivity as a result of working from home, so it's really promising stuff so far.
It's a good sentiment for good collaboration. Employee engagement is absolutely critical at supporting that work productivity, and also obviously retention of employees. It's somewhat challenging to engage employees during these last 2 months. Obviously, not only have people had concerns and worries with regards to their own health, but obviously concerns and worries about the job market and job security. So to monitor staff engagement when people are home working is definitely a challenge. One thing we would highly recommend is if you do engagement surveys and you monitor it throughout the year or biannually, then to continue that method. But just making sure that you are taking a nod to the home working practices that people have had in place. So obviously trying to understand how people are engaged at the moment. And obviously people's mindset is somewhat different, having those worries and concerns that we've just touched upon as well. But it's really important that line managers do know their staff, they understand when people are potentially in need of that additional support that they might have not needed historically.
Employee engagement and relations with employees have also changed. As much as we used to be quite a collaborative, organic working environment where people could just check in on people, engagement has had to take on a different form. So I think it's no secret that, most businesses have been relying on Zoom and sort of Microsoft Teams to keep in contact with each other, but it's talking about how we can potentially extend that beyond the work sphere. So we've seen virtual coffee meetings, we've seen virtual lunch meetings and quizzes, wine tasting has been a good one. And I think for a lot of people, kids can be a bit of a worry, it might not look particularly professional, but I think if we break down that taboo and we encourage kids to come on calls with us, maybe at scheduled time, so, workers are feeling less pressured to kind of hide that aspect of their lives, because it is a reality of what people are dealing with at the moment. And I think just keeping on top of employee engagement, especially at this time, is really, really key to keeping productivity at a good level.
So there's certainly some legal considerations to take in place when we've got home workers. The main thing is obviously that employee rights remain the same. So just because people are out of sight, they're not out of mind. So don't become complacent with your employees. While they're at home, they obviously need to have the same level of support and guidance that they would do traditionally. So, for example, if you're having a pregnant employee, which obviously has no doubtly happened within your business over the last few months, they need to make sure that if they are working at home, they have the same level of support that they would do in the office. So the welfare checks and the risk assessments need to be in place. Now, obviously, the risk assessment paperwork would somewhat differ because obviously they're not necessarily in an office environment with the same hazards and risks, but they are in effect lone workers at home on their own for multiple hours. So just ensuring that obviously you take guidance on that paperwork before completing it, and you are robust in ensuring that people don't fall into that trap of losing out. They still function in accordance to all the policies and processes and practices that you have in place. And then again, just having potential consideration, having an impartial eye, and something we can certainly offer to look at your policies and processes in place, just to ensure that they are suitable for home workers as well. So So consultation. So we all recall in situations where we've had office closures historically or office relocations where we've consulted with our employees. Obviously an opportunity to have a two-way dialogue to understand any concerns or issues that might be arising from that move or that location change. Obviously, if we are looking to permanently move our workers to a home working policy, then consultation is absolutely vital. We'd highly recommend giving employees that opportunity. For example, if you have an employee who's a sole caregiver, it's an opportunity for them to sit down and address any concerns or issues they may have around working permanently in the home setting. It's also an opportunity for you as an employer to iron out any questions or queries that you may have to your employee, such as arrangements for expenses. We obviously appreciate that some employers give subsistence for utilities and gas bills, and it's an important opportunity for you to address all of that and discuss that with your employee. And then after consultation process, it's an opportunity to formalise. And we would recommend then at that point it becomes a contractual amendment. So historically the place of work in an employee's contract may be a particular office location or a site or an establishment. Obviously once that consultation has concluded, it would become then a home-based contract, which is really important to have. Certainly when you go through an audit process, it's important to see where that employee officially moved from an establishment into a home setting. Obviously we appreciate over the last few months a lot of that has been fairly organic. And people have just evolved into home working, and it's not necessarily needed if this is something that's a temporary solution, but if it's going to be something you're going to permanently do moving forward, then certainly consider formally consulting and looking to do that contractual amendment with your employees.
So one thing that we have definitely seen is a rise in flexible working requests. Now, they weren't something that we massively came across before lockdown, but since we've had to go into a home working situation, we are seeing that people are revisiting interests and hobbies and perhaps wanting a reduction in hours, people spending more time with their kids, wanting to be around more with their families, wanting to reduce how many days they work. And I think ultimately a lot of people are requesting to work from home on a permanent basis. So any worker that has been employed by a company for 26 weeks is eligible to make a flexible working request, and it is the employer's responsibility to consider the request. So each employee, when making a request, should outline the reason why they want the request, how long they would like the request to last for, whether it's a permanent basis or just for a 6 months sort of thing, or when they want to start the flexible working request from. Employers need to evidence that they have given consideration to the request. So if an employee has been managing to work from home quite comfortably for 6 months and has shown that there's been no drop in productivity or issues with performance, then you need to be able to factor that into the consideration that you're making when you ultimately make a decision on whether to accept or decline the request as well. I think as well it's important to look at ACAS guidance. A lot of employees, when making a request, will be seeking advice from ACAS, which is available online. Their guides are really good. So I think it's important that employers are looking at the guidance as well, seeing what advice is out there for employees to make sure that they're keeping alongside the same framework, making sure that the request is dealt with in a timely and reasonable manner as well.
So claims culture. Unfortunately, we live in a world now of no win, no fee claims culture. There's lots of talk at the moment and predictions on the horizon that potentially we are going to see claims for personal injury, particularly around the lack of provision for suitable equipment for home workers. So we've probably all related to the fact that those first few weeks of working from home were dining tables, hunched over, kitchen tables, etc. But now, if we are looking to make this a permanent solution, as employers, you really do need to carefully consider what equipment an employer has. So potentially a suitable chair, suitable desk, screen risers, etc. So just ensuring that you seek health and safety guidance, and if necessary, do the appropriate health and safety assessment, workplace assessments. Unfortunately, we live in this world where claims are potentially going to arise. Another area that potentially could come from it is that fact that consultation hasn't arisen for home working. Obviously, we don't know what's quite going to happen in the future, but if people are going down a prediction route, then ultimately these are two areas that we should be carefully paying attention to.
Yeah, I think it's also important to consider any employees that have disclosed a disability to you, because under the Equality Act you do have a reasonable obligation to provide adjustments for them. So in some cases we've seen some of the bigger companies, perhaps with a bigger budget, have been able to issue staff with their own allotted amount of money or a voucher for furniture stores to perhaps purchase their own desks or chairs, or perhaps give the request in for the company, and the company will have them ordered to their home for them. Just things like that. It can be quite nice for an employee to have a say over their working environment as well, because I mean, I can speak from experience. I was working from my dining room table for 6 months, so yeah, it would be nice if if you can afford to do so, to make those sorts of accommodations where possible.
So indirect discrimination, so just being really mindful that we're not indirectly discriminating home workers against office workers or vice versa. So obviously for some individuals, if your home working is going to become a permanent solution, we are potentially sometimes taking some of those benefits away of an office environment as well. For example, access to some of the related benefits that they may have in an office. Obviously some things can't necessarily be overcome, so you can't obviously necessarily put a free childcare arrangement or gym into a home environment, but that's why consultation is absolutely critical, just to make sure that employees are really clear on what's happening, and just to be mindful of who you are deciding to become home workers over others. So what's the justification between a workforce if it's going to be divided between office workers and home workers? Again, consultation will overcome some of those hurdles and questions that employees may have, and it's an opportunity for you as business owners to be kind of transparent with that, and to obviously give that some forethought and consideration as well. So if benefits are going to be available moving forward, it's better to be honest and open with employees, and to be clear through that consultation process as to what's not going to be there in the future. Okay, data protection. This is obviously something that is certainly something to consider when people are working from home. And obviously, when we are taking equipment home, and employees obviously still have access to the same level of information. I've certainly come across payroll clerks over the last 6-7 months running payroll from their own home environments. Obviously, in the last few months, things have had to happen more, as I say before, organically and quite intuitively to ensure business survival. However, I think moving forward, if this is going to be a permanent solution, businesses really do need to be mindful of what provisions they're going to put in place. One thing we'd really recommend is obviously to make sure you review your data protection policy. So if you've obviously got any home workers in there, then that is fit for purpose. And one of the key things is to put into place a risk assessment. Things what you need to consider in part of that risk assessment is who might actually have access to that information. So who, if we're in a home environment, who can walk in. So for example, myself living in a household with a husband and a 2-year-old, who has access to that equipment if I don't lock my screen, and what information we've got. Is the employer home adequately secure? So obviously again, is it reasonable? If this is potentially a role that was, for example, highly sensitive information, such as a home office role or a cabinet role, then obviously the level of security that home would have would be far different than potentially a payroll clerk in an SME. But it is obviously something you need to consider and factor in, and make sure that you've evidenced the foresight in that. So what rules do you have with regards to encryption? So do you have any passwords on your computers for your employees? Is it multiple authenticity that you need to consider? And also, what information and rules do you have with regards to the retention of that data? So again, if people are at home, they may have taken hard copy data sensitive information home. How are you overcoming things such as confidential shredding and disposal of that kind of confidential information as well? And what measures should be taken against accidental loss or disruption or damages? So, for example, working at home with a young child, what happens if a sensitive document was left on my desk and was accidentally destroyed? Again, it depends on the context of the sensitive data, it depends on the size of the business, but it's certainly something that should not be overlooked. So just make sure that you review the policy and have a risk assessment that's reasonable and robust in place. So managing performance remotely. Obviously, one of the main things is to monitor and view employees. So obviously no different than it would be in a work environment. One thing we don't want to ensure is, going back to indirect discrimination, so we're treating home workers differently than office workers. And we don't want to assume, maybe through an unconscious bias perspective, that home workers are less productive than office workers. However, it's very difficult to track time and attendance when people are remote, and one of the things obviously in this presentation today you'll learn about is the different technologies that we can use to manage performance. But one of the main things is obviously and line managers and employees having that same dialogue that you would have in an office environment, for the line manager to observe the quality and the quantity of the amount of work that's coming in. So if that starts to drop off, and there is a reason for cause for consideration, the line manager's got some tangible evidence that they can present as well. And obviously, as the line manager would know whether that employee is taking longer than before when they worked in an office environment to complete that task. And it might not actually be because the employee is not performing. It could be because there's other factors that are attributed to that obviously lack of productivity. So really important to address that as well. So obviously setting meaningful deadlines, making sure that they're completed in those deadlines, and going back to communication, as Louise mentioned before, having daily or weekly Zoom conference calls with them to ensure that those deadlines and objectives are clear and transparent, and you communicate in the same way as what you would do in the office. So we've probably taken for granted that before the home working setting, we would obviously just peer across the desk as a line manager to see what our employees were doing, and some of those conversations that we would be in earshot to, we obviously don't have anymore. So it's really important that communication is at the forefront of what we do. As a line manager, you might also wish to do some random checks, just to ensure that there is the quantitative information there again in the background. And some employers have even moved to actually asking their clients around how they feel the home working situation is working. So, again, not necessarily making it the forefront of a conversation, but as subtle client care conversations, asking the clients themselves, how are you finding it? For example, with Michelle and Louise being at home, any different from what it would be if they were in the office? Are you getting the same response and the same support as what you would do when they're in the office arena? Okay. Working time regulations, obviously, as we said before, we talked about the legal considerations. Just because people are at home, it doesn't mean that working time drops off. If anything, one thing we've witnessed is some employers are actually exceeding their working time regulations while they're working from home. I'm certainly one of those individuals who's quite guilty of logging on early and logging off later, because I think subconsciously I'm mindful that I don't want people to think because I'm at home I'm slacking off, so to speak. So you may actually find that some of your employers are actually exceeding the working time regulations. So just ensure that those, obviously, you've got the policies in place and that the opt-out forms are being completed. But also think culturally as a business what you want that working time to look like. So, you'd be honest, part through that consultation process through employees, that there is an expectation to do more. If they're logging on at 7, is there flexibility for them to finish at 3 to do the school run? Again, through that consultation or through the flexible working request, this is all something that can be discussed and above board and documented, as opposed to it coming out and manifesting in different ways. Okay. Benefits.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the benefits of home working. There are 4 key things that we have picked up on with our clients and also working from home ourselves for the past few months. A massive trend that we've seen is sickness. Sort of short-term minor ailments are a lot easier to manage at home. We're finding that people don't necessarily have to take time away from the office to sort of make sure that they're okay. They can potentially medicate from home, they don't have to potentially go and see a GP, or they can get a GP appointment over the phone. A lot more GPs are being a lot more flexible around appointment times and things like that to accommodate the increase in work from the coronavirus. When it comes to recruitment, we're finding that a lot of our clients are really benefiting from the fact that they can open up the geographical catchment area of their potential candidates. So instead of just recruiting in your local area, you can potentially tap into people from other cities, and with that comes the salary arrangements as well. Some areas are a lot cheaper to recruit from because of the cheaper living costs. Some areas are more specialised in certain areas, so definitely that's something that we have found. Another one is that it gives a completely new, renewed boost to cooperation and cohesion. So, as I touched on earlier, you have to put in more effort to keep in touch. So instead of just coming over to someone's desk and going, "Oh, you all right? Had a good weekend," you can schedule in and protect time to have with your employees and make sure that those check-ins are meaningful. And I think that's really important at this time, to schedule catch-ups and also make sure that you're doing things outside of work as well, to make sure that those boundaries are clear. It also offers greater agility to react in time of crisis. So instead of having a situation where you've got a member of staff in the office that needs to be dealt with immediately, you can have that time as managers to kind of reflect. You don't have to worry about getting them off site or anything like that. You've got more space, more time to make decisions, and that means that you're not making decisions, at the snap. So that's good as well, that we've noticed.
So a first sensible step for employers to consider is implementing a home working policy if you haven't already got one. So all the things that we touched on today, the legal considerations, the data policy, the flexible working request, and the mechanics with regards to expenses and management of expenditure, then that can all be consolidated into a home working policy. Obviously it also enables that applications are treated in a fair manner, so there's no indirect discrimination that's going to be arisen. It's really important to remind business leaders that obviously home working is for lone workers, so again that policy would also cover off any legal health and safety requirements that you would need to consolidate into that as well. So who knows what the future is going to hold? Obviously the last 7 months have proved that we can't really predict future trends. We obviously do see that lots of businesses are moving forward to permanent home working, and no doubt as business owners and leaders yourselves, you obviously have got the foresight of whether that's going to become a solution. If not, I think it's really important to touch on what Louise said, and regardless of what your plans are, obviously you are going to have some employees who vote either with their feet and leave the business, or ultimately will have this as an awakening effect and change and make requests for flexible working or home working on a permanent solution. So just make sure that those things are in place. Obviously we're more than happy to support on that as well.
So please feel free to contact a member of the team if you have any queries regarding anything that we've touched on today, or if you're interested in any of the other services that we offer. Thank you very much for your time today, and it's back to Lucy Hedges.
Thank you.
A lot of things to really think about there. Ensuring productivity is super important, and getting that work-life balance is so crucial right now as we do navigate, this new normal. Working from home brings with it a whole new set of challenges. So it's super crucial that the right measures are in place to give employees the support that they need. And as cringing as they are, those video call faux pas are the best. My favourite has got to be when our editor's child came in and said, "Daddy, you smell," and threw an ice cream at him. It was the best. I'm not sure any video call faux pas are going to top that. So now we're on to that part of the event where I open up the floor to you guys, the audience. Before we do that, I just want to thank all of our presenters even for doing brilliant presentations, unleashing a wealth of incredibly useful information on us today. I know it's a lot to process, but hopefully you guys have found it incredibly useful. Now, if you have any questions, I do encourage that you submit them via social media using the hashtag BusinessReimagined. We've already had some brilliant questions in, which I'll get to in a moment, and we won't have time to answer them all as well. So you'll be able to email your questions to Sue Cad, and they'll respond to your questions individually. That email address, so get a pen ready, or maybe your fingers to type in, scad, SCADD @lincoln.ac.uk. Okay, so like I said, we've had some brilliant questions coming from you guys. I'm very conscious of the time, so I'm going to dive straight in with some questions. My first question is for James. No, my first question is for Paul, not James. What do you think is the future of office versus home working? And is there going to be a permanent change post-COVID? Paul, that's for you.
Yeah, well, I think there'll certainly be some habits that we've picked up during the lockdown and since then that will continue beyond the pandemic. But I think at first a lot of companies thought about their office space and thought, actually, do we need all this square footage? We're all working from home pretty effectively. Do we need to go back to the office at all? And I think that was a conversation that a lot of people were having for some weeks and months. But I think now it's kind of settled down. I think people are thinking they're probably going to downsize maybe on office space potentially. But I think the future of the office is still secure, because I think people need a central hub where they can meet and share ideas and more importantly, socialise as well, because working from home, as we've all found out these last few months, can be pretty difficult at times when you're on your own for several hours during the day. So I think the future of the office is safe, but I think people will continue to to work from home some of the time.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Offices do need that central hub. I think the great thing about, the positive side of what's happened over the last few months is that it's shown people that they can be incredibly productive and working from home. So yeah, it's giving employers the chance to maybe think a little bit differently. And I think that can only be a good thing. I, for one, am definitely an advocate of flexible working. So thank you, Paul. So our next question is for Ben. Will the new fibre network be available for everyone in Lincoln?
Thanks, Lucy. It won't be available straight away for everybody. It will be starting on the Science and Innovation Park, but the plans are for phase 2 to move into the city centre. But like I said in the presentation, if there are particular areas of Lincoln where people are struggling with connectivity, do let myself or Paul know, and we can then start building it into the network designs so that we are targeting the places that really need it and where there is the demand straight away. But the intention is to go where people need it.
Yeah, well, like most things, is a gradual rollout, and I think aiming it at the people that most need it is a most excellent place to start. Ben, thank you so much. And Paul, my next question is for you. Is there a simple platform to consolidate our telephony?
Okay, so I think we're asking, is a place to consolidate your telephony? So there are lots of platforms out there that will do more than just telephony. They'll give you things like video calling and chat and virtual meeting services. But I think what's important is when you're looking at the options, you find a platform that gives you everything in one place. Because I think, as I said in my presentation, that's what your staff will want. They'll want to be able to go to one place to do everything rather than going from one window to another to access different tools to do different jobs. So if you look at the various unified communication platforms that are out there, and we provide free at BlueCube, there are lots of different tools that will do everything in one place. If that answers the question, I think I understood that.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. And Michelle, over to you. Can I be doing anything proactive to be letting customers and clients know about my staff working from home?
Yeah, I think it's, customer and clients are probably in similar situations to you guys as well. So obviously they've got an element of sympathy to what we're all dealing with. Being proactive, being open and transparent, I think it's better to be honest about the situations we find ourselves in. Recently I was on a HMC call and they had an answer message up front, just to let all their customers know that you might hear some background noises, you might hear some dogs barking, some children. We've all seen the NatWest adverts where we've got everybody in the mix. I think it's just really important that customers understand from the onset that you've got either individuals in the office or individuals at home, and obviously give your employees that reassurance that that's absolutely fine. We obviously appreciate that you can't always necessarily have complete silence, and there's a healthy balance, and that can sometimes obviously stop some of those anxieties as well that employees may have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important to kind of let people know what the home situation setup is, because like you said, it gives people that reassurance and, solidifies their trust that the service that they're using is they're still going to get the same level of customer service and, duty of care at home. Let's see, James, I've got a question for you now. It can be very lonely and challenging running a business in the best of times. What advice can you give business owners and leaders on looking after themselves or maintaining their resilience now and over the coming months?
Thank you, Lucy. I think I would start with, excuse me, actually, business leaders aren't supposed to know all the answers to everything. And I think that's probably a good place to start. What you're supposed to do is actually know how to find the answers and who to talk to. So I think that's, don't take the burden on one's shoulders. The other one is communication, and communication's two-way. And I think it's very, very important that business leaders communicate effectively with their workforce. And that's a combination of speaking to them and communicating information, but also listening to them. That engagement piece is so important, and it isn't one way. I think also to look at drawing on peer-to-peer groups and other networks. You're not in this on alone. And actually, by talking to your fellow peers, either business providers, suppliers,
customers, actually talking to people and taking the time out to do that. I think also perhaps to reflect and say it's a mixture. What have you achieved as well as what do you need to do? I'm a great builder of lists at the start of day, and actually sometimes I'd be better off actually recognizing what I've achieved, because if I do the list of things to do, invariably I find I haven't done the things on my list to do, so I feel unfulfilled often by doing that. Actually, if I did a mix and actually reflected on what I've achieved, either in that day or the period I was looking at, as well as the things I need to do, I think that's a better balance. I think also looking after yourself. We're very good at saying, we're resilient and we'll carry on, we'll deal with this challenge that we face. But actually, we're now taking part in a marathon, not running a race. And we need to ensure business leaders look after themselves and take out time for themselves. So I think there's a host of things people can do. I think it's actually stepping back and reflecting on what you need to do as a business leader at the moment in time. Thank you, Lucy.
Oh, some fantastic advice there. And I think we can all relate to creating a list of to-dos and then not having that to-do list completed. It's enough to make you feel inadequate. It is 12:30. The event has gone incredibly quickly, just as I knew it would. So we've run out of time to ask and have any more of your questions answered. Like I said, please do send an email to Sue Cadd, SCAD, SCADD at lincoln.ac.uk, and we'll get as many of your questions answered as possible. I'd like to take the time to thank my lovely panelists, my presenters. I'm sorry we didn't get to give you as much screen time as I'd have liked, but your presentations are so fantastic and insightful that it's taken us to the end of our event. And thank you guys for some brilliant questions and for those excellent answers that you guys were able to provide. As before we close off, I once again like to thank this brilliant lineup of speakers who I'm sure you will agree have really brought this event to life today, covering a wide range of topics, from how to rebuild the foundation of your new remote business to keeping you connected, to connectivity, to productivity, and everything in between. I do hope you found it all incredibly useful and insightful and has given you something to go away and think about today. We will be back tomorrow. Like I said, it has gone really quickly. Don't fret. We'll be back tomorrow with more excellent speakers to talk you through helping your business navigate and overcome the coronavirus crisis. Once again, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Blue Cube and the University of Lincoln for putting this brilliant event together. And of course, again, I can't thank them enough to my fantastic speakers who've dedicated their time to getting involved in this vital virtual event for businesses in Lincolnshire. So all that's left to say is thanks once again. I'll hopefully see you tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.